Good evening, my fellow travelers on Spaceship Earth. It is I, and I am Guy. I'm coming to you from Applewood Station, where it is 20 degrees Celsius and raining. Looks like. Sounds like it. Sounds like it's raining out there, which is cool. I'm into rain. Rain is good. I'm doing the finishing touches on this album cover, this book cover, and then I'm going to send it off to be dealt with by Ron and company. So we will fire this off. First things first. I've duplicated, or I've saved another copy of it. So we're now on the 02 version of this, which is the way I do it before I make any major last minute changes. And the things I'm going to do this time are, I'm going to go ahead and turn everything off, and we're going to merge everything together. And so first things first, we've got the background. I take this background, I'm going to merge it all into one. That way I can work on it in its entirety if I need to. I'm going to delete this one because we didn't like it. And then I'm going to go through and we're going to bring up this guy. Right, so the primary colors and the overlays and everything like that. We'll put the ink lines back in right here. Actually, I'll cover those ink lines up. All right, we got another ink line here, which we're actually going to do it this way. And then we've got this guy, which is the writing. Some white highlights in here. And the sparkles are going to be their own thing. So I'm going to go on ahead and go down to the main line of that one and hit Control-Shift-E, and that merges that all together. Meanwhile, I'm going to take this ink layer and put it behind. Right, this is the blue line layers, so I'm going to take that out. I don't need the blue lines anymore. So the ink layer lives below it. And then we're going to take this, and we're just going to go like this and see what happens when we bring in all the top pieces. Because it actually looks like some of this belongs to, I'm never going to be able to see this until I do something like this. So we're going to do a 50% gray panel on the bottom just so I can see what I'm doing. All right. Because the 50% gray will allow me to see everything. The checkerboard, as wonderful as it is to indicate that something is happening, the checkerboard isn't very useful on this one. So that's not part of this, but this is. This is part of that. That's not, that is part of it somewhat. I don't know if I like that. And then we've got a detail pass in here, which I'm going to put on the other layer. But this is definitely part of this. So I'm going to go ahead and merge that one down. All right, then we're going to look at that. That's part of the magic layer. That's this layer. I'm going to take that layer out and that layer out and merge these two together. And it's just cleaning up my artwork. So we've now got this guy living on one layer, this guy living on one layer, and this guy living on one layer. And if it wasn't for the fact that this guy here lives on this weird outside layer like he's not supposed to, I'd be like really aggravated about this, but he doesn't. Hey, Ray. How you doing, my friend? It's been a long time since I've seen you. Well, I guess it hasn't. You were here a couple of nights ago. You just weren't here for very long. Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay. What I am seeing is this. I'm in the wrong layer. Mean airplane with an exclamation point? Hey, the Zucker brothers. If it was that movie, did you catch the humor? You might have been in a unique position to actually follow that humor. Because a lot of the humor in that movie is a play on words. And so if you caught all of them, that's actually a cool thing because, of course, yeah, it may have been because you missed a lot of the jokes, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. For multiple reasons. One, some of them are very generational. Like the jokes were funny if you were from 1970 watching the 70s horror movies that they were really into at the time, which, were based on the, Flight 733 from Chicago crashes because of this, and, that was very popular. There was a time when that was very popular. So it may be not that you just may be from a different generation. I don't think my kid would find that very entertaining either because you miss all of the jokes. And depending on what era you grew up in, you may not actually understand some of the jokes made just because airplanes have changed so much. Like airports and airplanes, especially post 9/11. All of those things were from 1970s airports. I mean, some of those jokes don't even make sense. They make sense to me, but only barely. Like the smoking and non-smoking, there used to be smoking on airplanes. We used to allow people to smoke cigarettes on airplanes, but they don't even do that anymore, ever. So, part of it is that even though I love that joke, smoking or non-smoking, smoking, please. And she pulls out the ticket and the ticket's smoking, I think that's particularly funny. But, it's one of those things. If you never had cause to be on an airplane with a smoking section, you wouldn't know. Right? I mean, that makes sense. Oh man, I'm allergic to it. I do love the Zucker films. They are really funny to me. But right? It is in fact a lot of it sort of inspired the Family Guy sort of stuff. But I mean, a lot of it was you'd have to. There's a lot of cultural reference to it. That there's nothing wrong that you didn't get some of that, but when I say cultural, I don't mean American culture. I mean specifically a specific part of American culture. Like you'd have to really be familiar with 1970s era horror plane crash movies in order to get some of those jokes. Um, like the whole thing about Stryker being an old military pilot and having PTSD. That was a thing in a couple of the old movies where they would, the pilot would get sick and they'd say, "We need a pilot." And this guy would like sit back and go, "I don't want to be the pilot because I had PTSD from all of the war." And so, it's kind of one of those things. It's all good. You don't have to like it. It's totally fine. There's no requirement. But I love those movies. Those are funny. I also think that some of them are English jokes, which that's why I was saying you might be uniquely positioned to find some of those jokes particularly funny. Um, you know, like when the doctor, says, we have to get him to a hospital. And she says, "A hospital? What is it?" And he goes, "It's a large building with lots of patients, but that's not important right now." Because, of course, in English parlance, that was two sentences, but he read it as one sentence, which made it a joke. Because then you take the two sentences and read them as one sentence. And they did it many times too. That was an ongoing joke. You don't have to like it. It's totally fine. I'm glad you watched it though. That's kind of cool. Yeah, but don't feel bad if you didn't like it. You're not alone. There are a lot of people who don't like those movies. They were, I want to say, we went through a slapstick era, and then we went through like this hybrid slapstick era where it was like, I don't know. It's like this, it wasn't slapstick in the classic sort of way, like like Laurel and Hardy or something like that. It wasn't classic slapstick, but it was still kind of slapstick. Like they were trying to, it was still sort of a play on words and play on scenes, and there were all kinds of things, and it was making comments about stuff like having to be forced to go through metal detectors at the airport has always been sort of a thing that nobody really liked. And so it was particularly funny that the metal detectors didn't pick up the guys walking through it with machine guns, but did pick up the old lady, because that's the way it feels sometimes. It feels like those metal detectors don't do anything except make your life more complicated. So some of those jokes were, yeah, but there's no requirement that you should like it. You're not alone. There are many folks who do not like those movies. Yeah. And it did. I mean, there was a number of movies that are from the same people, Airplane 2, the sequel, and another movie called Hot Shots and Hot Shots Part D. Because, I don't know why we have to do that, but, Then there was a movie out there called Top Secret, which was a spy movie joke thing. There were lots of jokes about spy movie stuff going on there in that one. And they're all in the same vein. So you may not like any of those. So I'm saying them all, but it occurs to me you may not like any of them. Be aware. I remember showing Airplane to my kid, and they were like, okay. Like, whatever, Dad. I mean, I guess if you think this is funny, So my kid wasn't as impressed with it either. You're in good company. I think a lot of it, though, has to do with the fact that you guys don't have the same experience in airplanes anymore. I mean, there's so very little you guys can do, and the airlines have changed so much. Have you seen Ghostbusters, though? Did you think that wasn't very funny either? I'm only curious. There's no correlation, really. I was just curious because that gives me a good feel of what kind of humor you like. So that makes so I don't recommend movies that you'll not like, I guess. I wouldn't recommend Hot Shots or Top Secret or any of those. Yeah, there's a whole set of them now. I haven't seen the newest one, Frozen Empire, yet. I'm gonna watch that here in a couple of days. It's a good movie. Nope. Yeah, that happened with me with Knight Rider. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 I hear that loud and clear. I have like a pseudo problem with the Speed Racer movie. Like, I really love Maha Go Go Go, which is the original movie that, or the original anime that it's based off of. It's one of my favorites from the old days, from my childhood, right? Maha Go 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 is such a great series of ridiculousness. And it is so much fun to watch and so much fun to just enjoy. And the movie was supposed to have that same campiness ish, but I don't feel like they did a good job of it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they took it too far. That's what I feel like. Like, the point was to make it which is fair. There are two different versions out there, depending on your inclination. The American version is completely redubbed. So, like, as in, they didn't bother to, I mean, they followed the story somewhat, but the scripts are from that era of dubs when we just mutilated it because they were making a new series for the kids. They didn't care whether it was good or bad or, you know, it because they were like, it doesn't matter, the kids are the only people who are watching this are the kids, so as long as it's shiny and sparkly, all the kids will care. Because back in the 80s, we all sort of felt like, or at least the population sort of felt like kids weren't very bright. And that was something they learned. They had to learn the hard way. And they did. They learned it by finding out with movies like when they were dealing with things like Sailor Moon, they really discovered that the kids did care and they weren't really hot on them changing too much. And so that took some time and it took some effort for them to kind of get there. But they did. They finally got there. And when they did, they started changing the way that our dubs worked. But it took some time. So if you're going to watch Speed Racer, there is the American version called Speed Racer of the cartoon, but you'll find the dialogue is similar to what you saw in the movie. And then if you watch Maha Go Go Go, which is the original version, it also has a camp to it. Oh. Tornadoes. I see. Yeah, that's not good. Who wants tornadoes? And you can be late. That's all right, my friend. We're sitting here talking about Speed Racer. You know. As you do. Yeah. Hey, we were talking about that one the other night on my other podcast. We were talking about dubs and subs and how some dubs are actually better, oddly. And I'm usually a snob, and this is true all the way across. I prefer to watch the show in the language that it was written in. So I'll watch German movies in German and French movies in French. And I prefer, even though I don't speak those languages at all, I've been watching K-dramas in Korean because I'd rather hear what they meant, what the actors meant, you know. You can feel what the actors were trying to say, even if you don't understand the words that they're saying. The emotion and the feel comes through very well. So I'm a real stickler and I'm a snob. I prefer to watch these movies in their original language, whatever that original language was, even if I don't even remotely speak it. It's my snobbiness. Now with anime, I do speak Japanese, so I don't really even need to turn on subtitles, obviously. So, I mean, naturally, your mileage, as I oft say, your mileage may vary. I feel like his nose is crooked. Just makes it look like it is. Ooh. Yeah, all I can do in French is get myself slapped. That's pretty much the best I could do. So more power to you. I know. Well, I mean, we are talking about. We have no room to talk over here in America because English isn't a language. It's three languages in a trench coat trying to get into a triple X movie. Like our English is just not even. It just sometimes I'm like, well, that's just a dumb. I think that French intentionally just adds letters to see if everybody is noticing. You have a common root, but not major root. It's a minor root. It's a supplemental root, as in somebody else added parts of your language in from French and Portuguese. So you've got common roots there, although obviously your primary language is not from that area. That's not where the primary stuff's from, obviously. Mm-hmm. Hey, look at you adding all the funny characters. Good job, you. Well, when you stop making sense there, Ray, I'll just, nod a lot. It'll all be fine. You can still be my buddy. I'll just nod at you a lot, and you can nod back, and all will be good. Right? And I'll just nod when you do that. Although apparently my kiddo can read Cyrillic now. That was a weird left turn. All of a sudden, one day just came in and said, I've got Cyrillic. Okay, you do you. I am making a sign for the convention that is coming up. And in the conventions, on the side of the lantern, I wrote, Main Street in Japanese. Well, the Japanese characters share, a common language with Chinese, and the ideograms are the same. So when you use the glyph for the character, say sun, it means the same thing in both Chinese and Japanese. It means the big ball of plasma in the sky, right? The sun, it means the same thing. Well, I posted a picture of it, and a friend of mine who speaks Chinese said, "Do you speak Chinese?" In Chinese. And I was like, "Oh, my Chinese is horrible. Like, I can't even. I mean, I got very little I can use out of Chinese. It's extraordinarily minimal." Does it offend you? Oh man, Serbia and Croatia. There's a thing. All kinds of stuff going on there. No, it's not. And it is kind of weird because you do share similar, like, um, you share similar genetic lines um, and historical lines, which is always fascinating to me. But you're right, you don't share much in the way of linguistic lines or cultural lines. I mean, there are some cultural lines that are similar, but not a lot, which is fascinating. Yeah, I find all of that to be very interesting. As an anthropologist, that becomes fascinating to me because there is a distinct difference between Mongolia and China as far as like culture. And I mean, I would even go so far as to say Mongolian culture is so different is more different from China than Japanese culture is from China. You know what I mean? Like, I think Japanese culture is closer to Chinese culture than Mongolian culture, which I find very interesting because there's an entire body of water between China and Japan, which makes that also intriguing. I am sure that there is a cultural anthropologist out there that has done an entire doctoral thesis on the differences between Mongolia and China and Korea and Japan and just that zone and everything. There is probably entire papers written on it. Some some probably Mongolian scientist or Chinese scientist out there who has found that to be an intriguing thing, you know? Probably. I might study it at some point down the road. That area is where I'm going to start concentrating whenever I get up into that point in my career. I did not know that. That's fascinating. That adds a whole new level of interesting to the statement. But that's probably because you have an orthodoxy church, right? I mean, usually when Latin's involved, you have a Christian church of some sort involved in there. Latin is effectively dead worldwide except in the church. Wow. If I understand the etymology of Mongolian script, it comes from Ugyr, which comes from Aramaic ultimately, as in, like, that's where it comes down from. Old Ugyr or Ugar, and then Aramaic, which means that it's Turkic. So it'd be Aramaic via Turkey across the Silk Road, likely brought down through Mongolia as a script. But it is interesting because, like, that's very distinct, and it probably has something to do with the era of the Huns, would be my thought, which started the breach between the two cultures. So your cultures are split there. That would be my guess. I don't know for sure. I mean, obviously, I'd go research it first before I wanted to say anything directly, but that would be my guess, is that it had something to do with the Huns, which split the two cultures. That and, like, probably Chinese aristocracy would be my other guess. There are some very interesting versions of it, but there are some other interesting things about Mongolian language. One, it's a vertical language, which is cool. So it's written from the top to the bottom. But unlike the other vertical languages, it's read from left to right instead of right to left, like Chinese and Japanese are. And Old Korean, if you were to go to Hangul, Hangul is also old. The old version of it goes the other direction, which I find really kind of cool. But I mean, I guess you kind of expect that of me. I'm just going to get all fascinated by this, and I find languages so interesting. And right. So your old Mongolian though is Yigir. How's that pronounced? Yigir. Oh man. Wow, that's interesting. That is a Chinese language. Yigir. Wow. It's because it's a. Oh, I see. Yeah. You have a classic Mongolian. So the original Ugyr or Yugir, Ugyr, that language is what is known as a pottery language, which means that they used it to mark on clay, like a clay tablet. So those languages, which, like Sumerian and some of the older languages that are really, really old, those languages had to be simplified to a point where you could write it on clay and it would make sense, because you can't drag a stylus, like you can't drag a pen through clay easy. It makes a mess of the clay. And so It probably does sound like Chinese. It probably has that. It's Turkic, which means that it's from that language family that does go to Turkey, like moves across the upper part of China, or upper part of Russia, I'm sorry, like the upper part of Russia near Kamchatka, and down through your area and then across. So it's like got all of that across to Europe and into the European side where it ends up in the Middle East. And all of that sort of travels upward. And so it moves up through your area and then doesn't go down into China proper very much. That's just the tradition of that language. It's a very old language. I'll learn how to pronounce it this semester, because this semester I'm taking languages. I'm taking anthropology language, linguistic anthropology. So the study of human language, which I have been looking forward to all summer long. I've been giddy. I've been giddy about it because I'm all about this. I have a big orange book all ready to write in and draw pictures. I'm ready to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would make sense. Although, if there aren't any origin words, like real original words, often it talks a little bit more about when and what part of when your country was settled, right? So if the people were nomads for a long time and they wandered a lot, then they would retain origin words from wherever they started from. But once they settle down, you start naming the animals and start naming the plants and things like that. And so, yeah, it sounds like Mongolians like English. It's not a real language. It's 3 languages in a trench coat. Just like English. Ours isn't. There are so many borrowed words in English. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. Which I know you know because you're learning our language. So you're learning how messy English is the hard way. Just such a messy language. So when we get to the point in this class where we are studying your area, I promise that I will get onto stream and tell you all the things I'm learning. Because I'm going to be so interested in it. Because that area is my favorite area of the world. Your area is the area that I love the most. The Southeast Asia, Upper Asia, up into the Russian sort of part of the world. I'm not that big on Russia as a culture, but I love all the Asian cultures. So I love all of the Southeast Asian cultures, the ones that are, Mongolia, China, Korea, Thailand, all of that area. Japan, of course. That's my other home country. So, yeah, it seems like Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia both have such interesting splits as far as culture and structure as well. Not as dramatic, but definitely an interesting difference in the culture. Someday, Ray, I've got to come visit you. I just got to come over there and visit you, and then you just have to show me all around and show me everything, because I'm going to be so into all of it. I'm going to be like, I want to see everything, It'll be so fun. I'll just come drop in, and you can just stick me in a hotel somewhere, and then I will spend the time wandering the streets with you, and you can tell me all the parts of the country and all the things, and I'd be so into all of it. I probably wouldn't be very good at picking up Mongolian, though. I'm so bad at languages, which is one of my gripes. you know? It makes me aggravated and annoyed that I'm bad with languages. Because I love talking to people and I want to talk to them in their own language, and I can't because I'm just bad at languages. But that's all right. And see, that's the stuff I love. The thing I am learning, the more I learn about people, the more I learn that we're all the same, for one. It doesn't really matter where you're from, we're all the same. But the other thing I always learn from people is how interesting it is what we have done to adapt our world. How did we make our world fit us, right? And sometimes that sounds really weird and different, and then it isn't. You know what I mean? Like, like you're making jokes about a place being so cold that it's like it's always so cold in inner Mongolia, and jokes about ice and ice cream and things like that. And I'm like, we make the same jokes here about Montana and New York, areas where it's so cold. And it's like, it's funny how there's a saying that says the more things change, the more they stay the same. And it means that, we always think that things are different, but they're not really. All of them are always the same. And I love that. There's a connection between all of us. And we are all still connected. Doesn't matter where we're from or what nation we're from or anything like that. It's always great. All right. I'm going to have to abandon this picture because I'm fussing with it now, and I don't want to fuss with it. Now I feel like I'm just messing around with it. I'm not happy with it. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that there are words that you don't understand from Inner Mongolia? That's a curious one. So, like, do you meet people from Inner Mongolia and there are just things where they say a word and you don't know what that word means? Even though you're speaking sort of the same language? Well, sure, but you still don't know them straight up. I mean, there's a phrase for that called context clues, and that is, I understand what you're saying from the context, but the words themselves don't quite make sense, right? So, I mean, is that something that you see happening a lot, that, or often when you talk to people who are from Inner Mongolia, like you have to use your context clues to sort of figure it out? Yeah. I was just curious, because that would be my guess too, is that I'd be like, not sure what you're trying to say, but I get an idea of where you're going. You know what I mean? Like, I sort of understand where you're headed for. And that one's a good one. Yeah, I could see that. There we go. I'm having the worst time tracking Japanese years. Oh, yeah. Russianized. I feel that. Try something. Next one will tell you he's got glasses on. Yeah. I think the eyes were too big. Yeah, that was my problem. I was having a problem with it. It didn't look right. And even kiddos said they didn't think that it looked totally right. Better. I'll smooth some of this out. I feel like this guy needs to move over even. That's weird. Not much though. Yeah, that's better. That had been bothering me for a while. There we go. That's better. We're done. Oh, yeah. I could see that. The old cultural fight between do we change ourselves back to the way it was back in the good old days, or do we march forward with progress? It's an age-old fight. Been going on for a long time. Mm-hmm. We call that linguistic drift. because the language drifts, starts to wander. When you have linguistic drift, it just alters the way and people say stuff. And oh yeah. I think that's even stranger is when they decide to drift it back. We've had a number of instances of that with French. Like they will try to drift it back and push it back to where it was before. I don't know. I feel like that's trying to relive a glory day. You know, back when our days were, back when we were the awesome country of ABCD, whatever that was, you know. And I want to go back to that time. Well, okay, but you really can't, you know. I mean, you're kind of stuck. You really can't do that. You can't go back to that time. You can't go back to that day. And it's all past. And that's kind of hard. And I get it. The hard part is living in a world where you're with a whole bunch of other countries. Because for a lot of us, that's cool. We just move on. But some people then look at it and go, well, but we were at war with this country, or we were in conflict with that country, or whatever. And they are better than us now. And we don't want that. We want to feel better than them. So we want to retreat back to the days when we were more awesome. And that's just one of those things. You can't do that. It doesn't work anymore. You can't walk back the clock. We all have to just be awesome together today. Today, we are awesome. All of us. From all the countries, we're all awesome. Awesomeness knows no boundaries. Awesomeness knows no country. Which is fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with nationalism per se, just I'm going to send this message from, or the message to Ron. I gotta find Ron. How long ago was it that Ron did this? All right. Here's the final. All right. 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 And it's always something weird. We're having that problem here with the, make America great again. America's already great. It doesn't need to be made great again. It's fine. And that's the problem. The whole point is that they think it's fine. They want it to go. It doesn't to go back. It's fine. But it's a thing. We have that same problem from time to time. All right. My docket is cleared. That one is out of the shop. We're good. These need to go downstairs with me when I go downstairs in a minute or two. Do I have power for that? Hang on. I'm going to check to see if I got power for this. Well, this might be something interesting. I have some CD-ROMs here, some old school CD-ROMs. Which, if I can get them plugged in and get this running, I might be able to read these CDs. Trying to figure out where all these plugs go. I have to try to kill me off on this stuff. Let's see if we get any kind of heartbeat on this. Well, that's a hopeful thing. It's interesting you're talking about kerning there. Kerning is the word we use to indicate the space between characters. And so the word kerning. All right. Let's see. Let's see if it says just open. Can I open it? fascinating. I'm looking at this disc and there's some interesting stuff here. Always something interesting. Always something interesting. I'll copy them over. I don't know. Some old stuff from about 2001. Looks like it's old data from 2001 at the convention that I work for usually. I'm hoping to get the original files from the badges that we used at the convention, because I don't think we have any of the original artwork files for the badges. So that's the real treasure that I'm hunting for. But right now this just looks like a whole bunch of concept designs and not, in fact, like the actual badges themselves. But this says final badge project on it. So maybe. I recently talked to some of the guys who originally did all the work at the original convention 100 years ago, and been kind of poking at them saying, hey, you guys have anything that I could use, sort of stuff. And they were like, yeah, I've got some stuff. And so they've been poking around and finding things and giving them to me, and I've been putting them into the archive. And that's kind of what we're looking for here. And so I'm copying them over right now. It just takes a long time because this is not a fast CD-ROM. And of course, I got a CD-ROM that's external because no machines these days have CD-ROMs anymore. So I had to get an external so I could copy stuff whenever I needed to off of a disk. But I'm waiting for this first disk to copy over. I don't want to open any of the files. Right? I don't want to open any of the files. Well, these aren't even DVDs. These are CDs, no less, which makes it even weirder. All the files are Photoshop files, so kind of like, I don't know if I want to mess with that. I'm not 100% sure, so we're just copying stuff over now. Now it's just us and the whir of my CD-ROM over there, my DVD-ROM, going, all right. So copied. Let's swap discs. See what's on this other disc. All right. Next, let's see what happens when this guy mounts up. Oh, this might be a little bit better. These actually are 2K. Oh, they are. Nice. All right. We're in. These are what we wanted. Wow. Older than dirt. This is good stuff, man. This is good stuff. I'll put it in here and go. 2000 NDK go. There we go. I'll move these in here. I'll open this up. And we'll take you through you and say copy and say paste. And this should start copying and it'll take forever because this is not a fast drive. Which is all right. This is another job that needed to be done, and it is now being done. Been meaning to do it for a while. It is weird to think about all the eras of things that we've gone through as far as storing media. And I mean, these discs are, 24 years old. They're almost a quarter century. So they're still holding the data. So clearly burned discs aren't so bad, They do have a limit, though. At some point, I'm going to copy these over here onto this hard drive, onto my hard drive, and then upload them to the cloud storage that we use for our primary materials holding. So, I mean, most of the time, the stuff that's for this convention now is all cloud-based. So, you mean in their Cyrillic language? Like, why did they drop that letter completely? I mean, sometimes it's drift in the same way that the U.S. dropped the U in a lot of words, like color. There was somewhere along the line, there was a reform where we reformed the English language for American, and our version of it is missing those U's and stuff. So, and we turned Q without the extra UE, so it's not Kiwi. It's just Q. So, and it's spelled CUE. Although a Q like that is just a Yeah. Yeah, I followed. Wow. A lot of weekend badges here. The amazing thing is we now know everybody who is here at Indicate 2000 because of this. Oh, Tony was here. Wow. About 400 badges in here on the weekend badges. These aren't the attendees in the top part of the... Wow, this is a whole different world. Just such a different world. I always think about stuff like this. I'm like, wow, just an entirely different universe we lived in back then. The convention was so much smaller, and there's so many fewer people there. And it was just very cute and small and lovely. And I love that, you know. Sometimes there is an attraction to the good old days, you know, now kind of talking the other side of what we just talked about, right? Because we were talking about, you know, what do you do if you're, you know, for those people who really long for the good old days, but, you know, sometimes it's not wrong. Well, but sometimes it's also nice. The convention now is huge. We've got thousands of people there, and there are so many humans in the room, and there's so many people. And it's nice to look back at 2000 when the convention was little and not very big, and there was 400 whole people who came in for the weekend, you know, and you had another extra, say, 150 total between that would come in on Saturday or Sunday only, and, you know, 50 who came in on Friday. So in total, you have less than 1,000 people who showed up. It was a convention called Nandescon. It's still called that, Nandescon. It's an anime convention, so it's all about Japanese animation. And we had an anime club in the 1990s, which was called DAI, DAI, because this was based here in Denver. So it was called the Denver Anime International Club, and we watched every month on the fourth Saturday, fourth Saturday of every month, we would have a DAI meeting, and the meeting would last pretty much all day, and it would go from about 1 in the afternoon to, you know, whatever, 12 at night or whatever, 11 o'clock or 12 at night, and we just watch movies. And back in the day, we would get the movies from Japan directly, and they would be on VHS. And so what would happen is there would be a lead VCR, and then everybody else would tie their VCRs together so that they all could get a copy of whatever was being played. And so you pretty much just hit record at the beginning of the evening, and somebody would put in the tape and we'd all watch the tapes, and then they'd switch the tapes to a different show, and they'd switch that tape to a different show, and such and such and so and so. And then somewhere about the late 1990s, we all decided, wouldn't it be cool if we could just make a convention? Because that wouldn't be hard. And so in 1997, all of the people in that little anime club formed a convention called Nandeskan. And I'm not really anymore. I used to be. I was more into it back in the 90s when it was kind of edgy and nobody knew what it was. I still watch anime today. I still love anime. I will always watch anime, I'm sure. But now I'm very particular. Like, I don't just watch everything. Now I watch mostly mecha anime. But, I mean, you've seen my artwork. I am definitely influenced heavily by anime. So, but that was a long time ago, and I was part of that revolution. So whenever we were talking earlier, I said Sailor Moon made a big difference and everything. It's because I was there when that happened. Well, watching Dragon Ball and One Piece can take up entire years. So that's still I'm not going to say that's wrong. There's a billion episodes of Dragon Ball. There's a billion episodes of One Piece. Yeah, Naruto's a thing. You're coming from a completely, by the time now Dragon Ball's been around since I've been watching. When I watched everything. But now there's so much out there. And I don't usually like the stuff that's mainstream. So if many people like it, I don't typically pay attention to it just because it's it's my little bit of rebellion, So I don't generally watch mainstream stuff. So I've watched a little bit of Naruto. I watched a little bit of One Piece, a little bit of all of these. It was. So Sailor Moon is ridiculously popular in Japan. And they brought it over to America and dubbed it into English, but they had to cut sections of it out because they made it into a kids show. And that was the big turning point here. Because up until Sailor Moon, they would bring anime over here, but then they would completely change it and alter it like Speed Racer. They would make the dialogue stupid. And they dumb it down and make it accessible to kids and things like that. And anybody who didn't die. They just cut that section out and say, he went somewhere else. So, and stuff like that. Like they would cut all of it apart and then put it on TV. And that's the first anime that I ever saw was those cut up versions. Like Robotech and Voltron and Speed Racer and Star Blazers. They look nothing like the original versions, right? Battle of the Planets. So those are like the big groups of them. Star Blazers is Yamato, Uchu Senkan Yamato, so space battleship Yamato, and Robotech is Macross, and like all of these things. And in the late 80s, early 90s, a friend of mine introduced me to all of the original versions of these shows, and it was mind-blowing to me. People were dying, people were getting killed, there were naked people. I mean, it was like the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen. and stuff that I saw these episodes, but I did not see any of that, you know. And when this anime club was existing back in the day, you had to get them from Japan, and then one or two people would speak Japanese, so they'd make a translation in a book, and you get the little books, and the books would have, you know, synopsis of the, you know, it would just have a one-page explanation of the episode. So you'd go in, and even though you didn't speak any Japanese, they'd play the anime up on the screen, and you'd read the little synopsis, and oh, okay, that's what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, because there was no subtitles or anything like that. So if you didn't speak Japanese, you'd just be lost. And we were watching Sailor Moon in the Dai meetings. So we actually knew what was going on in the Sailor Moon series. And so when it came to America and Deke bought it, the company is called Deke, D-I-C. When they bought it and brought it to America, they did the same thing that everybody else did. They cut it all apart and dumbed it down and changed the scripts and all of this stuff. And by then, there were enough anime fans who had seen the original to say, stop, don't do that. And it actually forced them to change. So Sailor Moon was a big moment. After Sailor Moon, everything that came out in anime is the same in English and Japanese. You know, they don't change the words. They don't change what they're saying or how they're saying it. There's no editing out the nudity. There's no editing out violence. It's exactly the way it was when it was in Japan. And that was a big change in our culture, because then anime started to become a teenage thing. Instead of being a little kid thing, it became more of a teenage and young adult thing to do. You'd watch anime when you were in your teens or when you turned 20 or whatever. And so it's just a different thing. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing is, you know, you get people who think it's for kids. And so immediately you can't show any naked people, because heaven forbid a child sees a naked person. They might melt or something or explode. Children might explode. Oh, that sounds cool. I love translated manga. Especially since the series that I love is Macross. I have always been a big Macross fan. And there has been a war for years between a company here in America and a company in Japan. The company in Japan made Macross, the original Macross, and sold it to a company here in America called Harmony Gold. And Harmony Gold had to oh man, I'd go look for it. Harmony Gold had to or Harmony Gold was responsible for dubbing it into English. Well, when they dubbed Macross into Robotech, they changed the story. So the story is completely different in Robotech than it was in Macross. And because of that, Harmony Gold has blocked Big West, which is the company in Japan. They've blocked Big West from ever selling Macross here until recently. And in fact, this is a big deal because Disney picked up Macross and will be showing Macross in 15 days. So in 15 days, finally, I will get to see the end of Macross Frontier, because this has been a fight, and Harmony Gold has blocked Big West until finally Big West took them to court for it. And they had to fight in an international court over it. And the problem is, since 1985, this series has been going on in Japan, and people like me can find it. We can find it, but it's hard. It's difficult to find it. And so we finally find we have to go track them down, which means that nobody knows about Macross. During the time that this whole war has been going on between Macross and Robotech, we've had all of this other anime show up, and everybody's been watching all this other anime, and nobody knows anything about Macross, even though they've got 5 different series now. So hundreds of episodes, and it's ridiculously popular in Japan. It's a series it's a series of series, if you will. It's a series of television series which have been running since then. I mean, I think we just finished Delta like 3 years ago. So the most recent versions of it are only like 3 or 4 years old, and nobody knows about it. It's like Gundam. Gundam, everybody knows about Gundam. But Macross was blocked. But in Japan, Gundam and Macross are the 2 top mecha anime. So they're the 2 anime about robots, and they're the top of the run. But here in America, people know Gundam, but they don't know anything about Macross. And that's so weird to me, because that's one of my favorites. It was the first one that I ever watched, the first anime that I watched, and it was the first time I'd watched an anime in Japanese. And so I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Macross. But it's also the reason that in my comic books I've got transforming mecha, because I'm a Macross fan. And that's like a big deal. Macross is Gundam, but everything transforms into fighters. So it's like somewhere between Gundam and Transformers. And what's so funny is Gundam came out, then Macross took the Gundams and transformed them into planes. Then Takaya took the transforming planes into robots and turned it into Transformers. So it's Gundam, then Macross, then Transformers. But here in America, it's just Gundam to Transformers. It just skips Macross altogether, which I find, it's just such an interesting thing, because there's an entire subculture there that's just gone. It never made it. And it's all because Harmony Gold had to be a jerk about it, So, shrug. It's one of those things. And now that it's been fixed, I'm looking forward to it. It's all right. I love Gundam. Gundam's another one that's really good. So Gundam has a lot of the stuff that I like out of Gundam is the same stuff that I like out of Star Wars. Right? Like, it's not necessarily the lightsabers and the spaceships that I like out of Star Wars. It's them asking questions about people and how we work. In the case of Star Wars, I really love it when they talk about the Jedi and they talk about the Sith and stuff like that. Right? It's in Russian and you're like, So that's fair. If you ever do want to watch it, it's got some interesting things, but I don't recommend you watch Gundam G at all. The ones that I really like are the originals. So anything that's Universal Century 0080, 0080, those are the best ones. Stardust Memory 0083. Yeah, it's very political. It's a very, very political manga or anime. They've got 2 warring factions, and it's got a lot of politics, which is interesting. But the biggest thing that's interesting about it that I like is that the politics are all logical. And it has nothing to do with our politics in real life. But there's also one of the things that's going on in there is that the humans are evolving. And so the politics are also kind of working around the fact that we have humans that are changing. Like there's a new strain of human being in there called a new type. And the new type has a little bit of telepathy, has a little bit of um, uh, clairvoyance. They can see just a little bit in the future. So if you try to shoot a new type, he can actually dodge out of the way of the bullet because he can see in the future just enough to see where the bullet's going. And they can talk to each other through telepathy and stuff like that. And they're new types. That's a new evolution of human beings that just naturally occurred in the middle of this war. And so there's a lot of talk about the new types and how you deal with the new types and what do you do with a group of people who are effectively superpowered, and stuff. So is a lot of the talk that we get from X-Men, but done before X-Men. And a lot of it is kind of fascinating. And it's like, yeah, right, exactly, like the Jedi. And that's the stuff that always interests me, of course. I'm a cultural anthropologist. I love culture, right? I love to talk about the cultures. And so I'm fascinated by this, you know. How do you deal with these things? How do you deal with new types? How do you deal with Jedi? You know, how do you deal with all of these guys? So that's my thought. We are past my bedtime. It is time for me to start winding down and going to bed. But I will talk to you tomorrow night, right? Because tonight's Wednesday, yeah? Tonight's Wednesday. Has school started for you yet over there, Ray? Yeah, today's Wednesday. So it's Thursday for you, though. But yeah, has school started for you yet? Because school's about to start for me. My school starts on Monday. I get my first real super nasty Japanese class. We'll have to see how that goes. I already have homework. I have a teacher who's already assigned me homework. We haven't even started yet. Yeah. Oh, wow. You got a long time before school starts for you. Lucky. I don't know. I'm enjoying school now, of course. Naturally, I'm enjoying school, so that's a different story. But yeah. All right, my friend. It was always good talking to you. I really enjoyed discussing stuff with you. Like I said, someday I'm going to visit you. You have to give me all the good food, though. You have to find all the good food. If I'm going to Mongolia, I'm getting good Mongolian food. Just I don't eat bugs. So if you've got bugs, just don't even bother. So this is my new thing. I'll travel anywhere and eat just about anything, but not bugs. It's my new rule. I am not sure if I eat bugs in Japan or not, but I don't want to think about it. So there we go. All right, my friend. Have a good day. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you later. Right? That might be hard. It's like there's bugs everywhere. Stupid bugs. All right, my friend. Have a good evening, and I'll see you later. Good, because I'm worried. People have been talking about bugs and eating bugs. Like even here, all over the place, people are like, we should eat bugs. And I'm like, no, don't eat bugs. They're bugs. Ugh. Who eats bugs? Ugh. All right. I will talk to you later. Have a good day. And for everybody else who's been here tonight, I appreciate you watching. And as always, keep your eyes on the stars. Good night.